What's it mean? And how do you know it's done? Two questions abstract painters get asked on repeat. Hi, I'm Tamara Grand. I'm a self-taught abstract artist working out of my home studio in Port Moody, British Columbia. This is Studio Diary, a bi-weekly series where I take you into my studio and show you what I've been working on. Whether you're an art collector who wants to see what goes into an original painting, or a fellow artist who just likes watching somebody figure things out in real time, you're in the right place. Welcome. So I'm standing in front of a body of work that I created this summer. 11 paintings, all in a similar color palette, all with a similar feel. And when I started this work, I had no idea what it was going to be about, or where it was going to lead, or how many pieces might end up in this collection. So like a lot of other abstract painters I know, I don't really have a big plan for my work when it starts. My work's not inspired by anything traumatic or anything political or anything that's out there that you might recognize. That sometimes happens along the way, but that's never the intention when I start. So this summer, my goal was to paint big, whatever that was going to look like. I bought 3 large canvases and chose a very limited palette so I wouldn't have a lot of decisions to make as I went along, and played around and experimented just to see whether or not I could make this leap in terms of substrate size. I started each of these 3 large paintings the same way, with graphite lines that connected one edge of the canvas to another, partially to break up that white space, but to also make sure that when I started going in with paint, that I would treat the canvas as a whole, not just as a bunch of separate parts. The first painting came together fairly quickly. I really loved the organic shapes and the flow of those shapes from the top right corner to the left. And when I wasn't sure whether there was anything else I wanted to add, I started to move into that second painting. Second one, it changed a little bit. In response to the darkness of the first piece, I decided to focus more on light. So the lighter yellows and ochres were coming to the surface, giving it what I think is a really wonderful sort of airy and very, very different feel to the first piece. The third one, I let the palette evolve a bit more. I added a yellow, a lovely bright yellow to it, and I changed the orientation of the canvas from portrait to landscape. I think that might have been a little hint to what the work was going to be about. Once that piece was well along the way, I decided I wanted to keep working in landscape orientation, and because I did not have enough room in the studio for a fourth 48 by 60 inch canvas, I started working on a pair of 24 by 48 inch pieces. So it was in the middle of these 24 by 48 inch canvases that I started to get a hint of what this series of paintings was going to be about. I was starting to get that feeling of land and sea and sky and maybe a disrupted sort of landscape idea, but possibly also a landscape that you see from above, almost like a map. And it hit me that all of this was coming from a book that I had read earlier in the summer, a book called Land by one of my favorite authors, Maggie O'Farrell. I highly recommend you read it if you like historical fiction. She describes land as a palimpsest, so the idea that what land used to be is never fully erased, that all of its uses and the way it appears over time, the way humans use it, the way different societies and cultures experience it, those things all just get layered one over top of each other, and sometimes they get scraped back and we see a little bit of what came before. And I got very interested in the idea that maybe that's what I was doing with these paintings as well. This is where the idea to add some stencils in and some marks that might be thought of as a little more cartographic, a little bit more representational of what you might see on a map. And I let some of them remain more visible than others. Some of them I really did bury, just so that there's a hint of the stencil and the shape showing through. And one of the things that I do when I'm not sure whether a painting is finished or not is start a new one. Move on, see if I can take some of the ideas from the ones I was working on into the new one, and then maybe see if they feed some ideas back into the previous work to help it get closer to finish. This is a 30 by 40 inch piece that I started alongside that pair of 24 by 48 landscapes. So after continuing to work on these 6 pieces, back and forth from one to the next, making smaller and smaller marks and spending more and more time sitting and second guessing myself, I started to wonder if maybe some of them were finished or very close to being finished. And I was also feeling a pull to do something a little bit different, to add another color, to explore with a slight variation on the things that I've been working on, which for me is always a sign that this exploration is done in its current form. Maybe the paintings are also done in their current forms, and it's time to move them aside, turn them to face the wall, and to get on with that further exploration. The other thing I often do when I'm feeling like something is finished or close to being finished is paint the edges and think of titles. The titles were starting to come to me, the edge colors were starting to come to me for a few of these, which was a good sign that maybe they're done, or as done as they're going to be for now. So I made a deliberate shift that felt a little bit risky. I pulled out a tube of cadmium red medium, which is not at all in the palette of these paintings. And I started work on 4 12 by 12s in the way I'd been working before, but with the addition of this really, really warm, bold color in a few small places around each canvas. I left these smaller pieces a little bit unresolved with a little bit more tension than I'm usually comfortable with for a reason. I think that adds a little bit more variety to the collection, but I also think it challenges me to see if I can do something similar in a larger painting. And because I'm very repetitious in my work and I have to do the same thing over and over and over again, I started a 36 by 36 inch canvas with some bigger, redder shapes and drips that I buried to a certain extent, but allowed to peek out just enough to contrast with that harmonized landscape palette that I've been working on. So now it's time to step back and look at all 11 pieces together as a body of work. And the only way I can do that in this studio is with a wide angle shot from the distance, and you can't see them all face on. But I hope that you get the sense that there is a thread running through the work, that there's a story that these paintings are starting to tell. And for me, it's very clear that the story is about landscape. Maybe not a recognizable landscape, maybe an imaginary landscape, maybe an amalgamation of different landscapes that you've seen or experienced or dreamt of. And this idea of transitioning between a view where you're standing in front and looking at it, or maybe being up close and feeling like you're immersed in part of it, or maybe looking down from an aerial view when you see some of those marks that are really more cartographic in nature. So if we kind of come back to that first question, what does it all mean? I don't know. You tell me. It means that I paint through repetition, and by doing the same thing over and over again, I start to become familiar with the idea or the thing that I'm painting, that similar marks come back and show up time and time again, that one painting gives you a hint of what's in another painting and they kind of echo and circle back one on the other, and that really my whole process of painting is very similar to this palimpsest process that Maggie O'Farrell describes in her book Land, that we build on things and we remove things and we refine things and we use things in a slightly different way. And at the end of the day, we're left with something that we interpret in the context of our own travels and our own lives and our own experiences. So here's a little meander through the entire collection. So back to that second question. How can you tell when a painting is finished, or in this case, a body of work is finished? I think for me that there are three different types of signals, and I've talked about them all here already. One is the urge to move on to something new. I stare at a painting for a long time, and I don't really see how adding a mark or taking a mark away is going to really change the story that it's telling. So I get itchy feet. I want to do something else. The second is I really get called to paint the edges, to take the tape off and to find a color that really brings the whole painting together. Now, once the edges are painted, that doesn't mean I can't add some small changes to it, but it means the big stuff is pretty much locked in. And the third little hint to me that work is finished is when titles are starting to circle around in my head. And all of these pieces right now have titles assigned to them. Some of them I've written them on the backs of the paintings, so they're pretty much locked in. The others, there's still a little bit of flux if I decide to do anything more to the paintings to really finish them off. So this feels like a good place to stop, both for today and with this particular body of work. I've written an exhibition proposal that I've already submitted based on these 11 pieces and one work on paper that's also finished. I'm heading out of town for 10 days to hang out with some friends and some art friends and do some fun arty things, which I'm hoping I'll be able to get some footage of and share with you. And I'm feeling the urge to do something a little bit different from what you're seeing here. So natural pause, and next time we chat, I may have some ideas with where things are heading next. So now I have a question for you. If you're a painter or an artist or you make things, how do you know when they're done? Leave me a comment below. I would love to have a conversation about this. And if you're someone who loves to look at art and collect at art, I'd like to know, do you want that piece of art fully resolved? Do you want the artist to tell you the story and what the work means and fill in all the gaps? Or do you want them to leave it a little mysterious, maybe give an ambiguous title, maybe a vague description, and let you fill in the rest of the story yourself? Please leave comments below. Likes, shares, and subscribes to this channel are always appreciated. Trying to build my YouTube channel and the Studio Diary series, so the more of you who interact with it, the easier it is for me to do that. Thanks for sticking around to the end, and I'll see you in 2 weeks.